The sun rises blood red over the Pacific on February 16, 1945, casting long shadows across a small volcanic island that looks like a prehistoric beast sleeping in the ocean. This is Iwo Jima, 8 square miles of black sand and death, waiting 750 miles south of Tokyo. On the bridge of his flagship, Rear Admiral William Spike Blandy adjusts his binoculars and studies the target that has consumed his thoughts for months. Around him, 6 massive battleships, the USS Arkansas, Texas, Nevada, New York, Idaho, and Tennessee, position themselves in a perfect line of destruction. These old ladies of the fleet mount 74 heavy guns, and today they're going to unleash hell. Blandy earned his nickname The Rock because nothing shook him. Not the disaster at Pearl Harbor, where he'd watched the Navy's torpedo program fall apart. Not the bloody beaches of Normandy, where these same ships had pounded German fortifications into rubble. Today, he commands the most devastating pre-invasion bombardment in Pacific War history. But 8,000 yards away, deep beneath Mount Suribachi's volcanic slopes, Japanese Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi crouches in his underground command bunker, watching the American fleet through a periscope. His weathered hands grip a field telephone, connecting him to 1,000 men buried in caves and tunnels throughout the extinct volcano. These aren't ordinary defenses. They're part of an 18-mile underground labyrinth that has taken 8 months to build. Atsuchi knows something Admiral Blandy doesn't. Something that will turn the next 3 days into America's most expensive lesson in the Pacific War. The morning air carries the smell of sulfur from Iwo Jima's volcanic vents, but soon it will reek of cordite and death. In a few hours, the most powerful naval bombardment in history will begin. When it ends, both sides will discover that brute force means nothing against an enemy who understands that the real battle happens where you can't see it. The question that haunts every military planner is about to be answered in the most brutal way possible. What happens when unstoppable force meets immovable will? As Blandy raises his hand to signal the bombardment, 30,000 Marines crowd the decks of transport ships beyond the horizon, watching the show that's supposed to clear their path to victory. They have no idea they're about to witness the birth of modern warfare's most terrifying truth, that sometimes, the more you destroy above ground, the deadlier what waits below becomes. The clock reads ZO 600. In 60 seconds, the Pacific War's bloodiest chapter will begin not with a Japanese attack, but with an American one that will fail so catastrophically that it changes the course of history itself. To understand what's about to unfold, you have to go back 8 months to June 1944, when Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi first set foot on Iwo Jima. Unlike every other Japanese commander in the Pacific, Kuribayashi had lived in America. He'd studied at Harvard, knew American industrial might, and understood that Japan couldn't win this war through conventional means. Standing on Iwo Jima's black beaches, watching his engineers survey the terrain, Kuribayashi made a decision that would redefine warfare itself. He would not fight the Americans at the water's edge, where previous Japanese defenders had been slaughtered by naval gunfire. Instead, he would let them land, let them celebrate, let them think they'd won, and then kill them from positions they never saw coming. The Americans will come, he told his officers, and when they do, we will make them pay for every yard with their blood. What Kuribayashi built over the next 8 months was unprecedented in military history. Using Iwo Jima's natural caves and volcanic fissures, Japanese engineers blasted an underground city. Command bunkers 75 feet below ground, connected by tunnels wide enough for trucks. Artillery positions carved into Mount Suribachi's heart, with firing ports disguised as natural cave openings. Storage rooms filled with ammunition, water, and medical supplies. Barracks for 21,000 men who would live like moles for months. Every position was designed to survive naval bombardment. Every tunnel had multiple exits. Every gun emplacement could support two others with crossfire. When American B-24 bombers pounded the island daily, starting in December 1944, they hit empty bunkers and dummy positions while the real defenders waited safely underground. Admiral Blandy knew none of this as his bombardment plan took shape. 3 days of shelling would precede the Marine landing, 4 times the firepower used at Tarawa, where similar defenses had been obliterated in hours. Marine commanders begged for 10 days of bombardment, but Blandy was confident 3 would be enough. "We'll blow that island off the map," he told his staff. "Nothing can survive what we're about to throw at them." At 0803 on February 16th, the USS Tennessee's 14-inch guns roar to life. The sound is indescribable, a physical force that shakes the ocean itself. Within minutes, all 6 battleships are firing in sequence, their massive shells screaming across the morning sky like freight trains. Each shell weighs as much as a small car and carries enough explosive to level a city block. From the transport ships, Marines watch in awe as Iwo Jima disappears behind walls of smoke and flame. Geysers of black sand and volcanic rock shoot hundreds of feet into the air. The island seems to convulse under the punishment, its surface rippling like water. "Jesus Christ," whispers Corpsman John Bradley, watching from the USS Missoula. "How could anything survive that?" But Colonel Atsuchi, deep in his command bunker, feels only vibrations through the volcanic rock. His telephone network remains intact. His ammunition dumps are untouched. His carefully positioned guns wait silently in their cave mouths, invisible to the American spotting aircraft circling overhead. The bombardment continues for 3 days. 14,000 tons of shells, more firepower than some entire World War I battles. American newspaper headlines crow about the pulverization of Iwo Jima. Military analysts predict the island will fall in 4 days. Yet disturbing signs emerge for those willing to see them. Spotting aircraft report no secondary explosions. Ammunition dumps aren't detonating. No major fires burn beyond the initial shell impacts. Most troubling of all, Japanese anti-aircraft guns keep firing from positions that should have been obliterated hours ago. Lieutenant Commander Frank Peterson, flying spotting missions for the 5th Marine Division, radios back troubling reports. "I'm seeing muzzle flashes from caves that should be rubble. These positions are dug deeper than we thought." Admiral Blandy dismisses such concerns. His battle damage assessments show extensive destruction across the island. Aerial photographs reveal countless shell craters, demolished buildings, shattered airfields. By any measure, the bombardment is succeeding. But deep beneath Mount Suribachi, Colonel Atsuchi studies his maps and checks his communications with growing satisfaction. The Americans are firing at shadows, wasting their ammunition on empty positions while his real defenses remain untouched. His men report minor damage from near misses, but the tunnel network holds. As the 3rd day of bombardment draws to a close, Atsuchi issues his final orders. Tomorrow, when the Marines land, his men will wait. They'll let the beaches fill with American troops and equipment. They'll watch the initial waves establish their beachhead and signal success back to their ships. And then, at precisely the right moment, 21,000 Japanese soldiers will emerge from the earth, like an army of the dead, and turn those beaches into the bloodiest killing field in Marine Corps history. The bombardment ends at sunset on February 18th. In the gathering darkness, American ships report mission accomplished. Intelligence estimates suggest Japanese strength has been reduced by 60%. The island is ready for invasion. But in his underground command post, General Kuribayashi pens a letter to his wife. "The Americans believe they have weakened us. Tomorrow they will learn that some things cannot be destroyed by fire from heaven. Tomorrow they will learn that the earth itself can fight back. As night falls over Iwo Jima, 30,000 Marines prepare for what they expect to be a routine landing. Above ground, the island looks like the surface of the moon, cratered, blasted, lifeless. Below ground, an army waits in perfect readiness to spring the deadliest trap in Pacific War history. February 19th, 1945. H hour, 0900. The morning breaks clear and calm over Iwo Jima, with perfect conditions for an amphibious landing. Aboard the transport ships, 30,000 Marines crowd into their landing craft, many joking nervously about the easy day ahead. The 3-day bombardment has left the island looking like a moonscape. Surely, nothing could have survived that hell. Private Jim Naughton of the 28th Marine Regiment climbs into his Higgins boat, loaded down with rifle, ammunition, and field pack. Around him, his buddies are uncharacteristically quiet. Nobody talked, he would later recall. God only knew what was ahead of us. At 0859, precisely on schedule, the first wave of LVT amphibious tractors churns toward Iwo Jima's southeastern beaches. Behind them, waves of Marines follow in sequence, timed to hit the beach every 5 minutes like clockwork. It's the largest amphibious assault in Pacific War history, a perfectly orchestrated ballet of sea power and Marines. Admiral Blandy watches from his flagship as the first LVTs touch the black volcanic sand. His spotters report no enemy fire, no resistance. The bombardment has worked exactly as planned, but those black beaches hold a terrible secret. The sand isn't just dark. It's made of volcanic ash so fine that men sink to their ankles with every step. Running is impossible. Digging foxholes is like trying to shovel water. The Marines who stumble off their landing craft find themselves trapped in nature's own killing ground. Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson of the 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, watches his men struggle forward in slow motion, weighed down by equipment and fighting the treacherous footing. Behind them, more landing craft arrive every 5 minutes, creating exactly the target-rich environment General Kuribayashi has been waiting for. For 30 minutes, an eerie calm settles over the beaches. Marines push inland, securing their objectives with surprising ease. Some begin to believe the bombardment actually worked. Radio reports flow back to the fleet. Landing proceeding according to plan, light resistance. Deep beneath Mount Suribachi, Colonel Atsuchi watches through his periscope as the beaches fill with American troops and equipment. Trucks bog down in the sand. Artillery pieces sink to their axles. Ammunition dumps stack up in neat, vulnerable piles. When he counts 10,000 Marines crowded onto the narrow beachhead, he picks up his telephone. "All stations," he speaks calmly into the receiver, "commence firing." The earth erupts. From hidden positions throughout Mount Suribachi, Japanese artillery opens fire with scientific precision. Every gun has been pre-sighted on specific zones of the beach. Every range has been calculated and tested. Shells begin falling among the Marines with mechanical regularity, one every few seconds, perfectly placed to inflict maximum casualties. But it's not just Mount Suribachi. Across the entire island, 21,000 Japanese soldiers emerge from their underground positions like an army of the dead. Machine guns chatter from cave mouths that should have been obliterated. Mortars fall like deadly rain from positions that don't appear on any American map. Artillery pieces fire from bunkers that survived 3 days of the heaviest bombardment in Pacific War history. Private Naughton finds himself pinned down in the black sand, unable to move forward or back as Japanese fire sweeps the beach in systematic patterns. It was like they had the whole area dialed in, he remembered. Every few yards, another shell would land exactly where they wanted it. The Marines are trapped. Behind them, the ocean. Ahead, a 15-foot terrace of volcanic ash they can't climb. Around them, perfectly coordinated fire from positions they can't see. Men begin falling by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, watching his Marines die in the killing ground, makes the decision that will define his legacy. Standing up in the hurricane of fire, he bellows at his men, "Okay, you bastards, let's get the hell off this beach." It becomes the rally cry of Iwo Jima. Marines who can't run begin crawling forward through the deadly sand, using sheer will to overcome the trap that has been set for them. Some die within yards of their landing craft. Others make it to the terrace and begin the agonizing climb up the volcanic ash wall, knowing that Japanese gunners are waiting for them at the top. But Admiral Blandy's old ladies aren't finished fighting. As reports of the massacre reach the fleet, something unprecedented happens in naval warfare. The battleships abandon their safe positions and charge directly toward the beach. Captain Harold "Pop" Grosskopf of the USS Nevada makes a decision that breaks every rule in the naval handbook. He orders his ship to close to 2,500 yards, point-blank range where a lucky Japanese shell could sink his battleship. But his Marines are dying, and nothing else matters. At 1512, Nevada's 14-inch guns open fire in direct fire mode, like massive rifles aimed at specific targets. Grosskopf has spotted muzzle flashes from a cave complex east of the beaches. Guns that have survived 3 days of bombardment are still killing his Marines. Nevada's first salvo screams across the water in a flat trajectory, striking the cliff face with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion is visible from every ship in the fleet, a column of smoke and debris that rises 500 feet into the air. When it clears, an entire section of the cliff has been blown away, along with the Japanese gun position hidden inside. "That's how you do it," shouts a Marine artillery observer watching from the beach. "Get those Navy boys in close where they can see what they're shooting at." Other battleships follow Nevada's lead. The USS Tennessee moves to 3,000 yards. The USS Idaho closes to 2,800 yards. For the first time in the battle, American firepower is being applied with surgical precision against targets that are actually there, not just suspected positions marked on outdated maps, but the damage is already done. By nightfall on February 19th, the Marines have established their beachhead, but at a cost that shocks even veteran commanders. 2,500 casualties in a single day, including 519 killed in action. The beaches are littered with wrecked equipment and wounded men, while Japanese artillery continues to fall throughout the night. Corporal Charles Johnson of the 3rd Battalion, 28th Marines, crawls into a shell hole as darkness falls and tries to process what he's witnessed. "I looked at the beach, and it was like hell on earth," he would write in his diary. "Bodies everywhere, equipment burning, and we still don't know where they're firing from." The 3-day bombardment, 14,000 tons of shells, the most devastating pre-invasion barrage in Pacific War history, has failed catastrophically. Instead of destroying Japanese defenses, it has merely driven them underground where they've become deadlier than ever. The Marines have landed successfully, but they've walked into the most sophisticated trap ever devised in warfare. As the first night on Iwo Jima descends, both sides understand that everything has changed. This won't be a 4-day battle, as predicted. It will be a 36-day nightmare that redefines what it means to fight for every inch of ground. The Japanese have proven that underground fortifications can survive any bombardment. The Americans have learned that sometimes the most powerful weapons in the world are useless against an enemy who refuses to fight on your terms. Admiral Blandy's old ladies will continue firing for 5 more weeks, eventually expending more ammunition than some entire World War I campaigns. But they'll never again have the luxury of believing that firepower alone can win battles. The age of underground warfare has begun, and Iwo Jima is its bloody baptism. Colonel Atsuchi, still alive in his Mount Suribachi command bunker, allows himself a moment of satisfaction as he surveys the day's work. His carefully planned defenses have performed exactly as designed, but he knows this is only the beginning. Tomorrow, the real battle starts, and it will be fought not on the surface, but in the dark tunnels and caves where his men wait like patient spiders for the Marines to come hunting them. 36 days later, the guns finally fell silent on Iwo Jima. When the smoke cleared and the final casualty counts were tallied, the numbers told a story that military planners are still trying to understand today. Admiral Blandy's old ladies had fired more than 14,000 tons of shells, enough explosive power to level a major city. The Marines had taken their objective, raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi in the most iconic photograph of World War II. Victory was achieved, but at a cost that shook the American military to its core. 6,800 Marines killed in action, 19,000 wounded. The only battle in World War II where American casualties exceeded Japanese losses. The bloodiest 36 days in Marine Corps history, all over, because a 3-day bombardment failed to accomplish what it was designed to do. Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi never lived to see the final outcome. He died in his Mount Suribachi command bunker, fighting to the last man as his tunnel network was systematically cleared by Marines using flamethrowers and demolition charges. His body was never found, likely entombed forever in the volcanic caves he had defended so brilliantly. But Atsuchi's legacy lived on in the man who had taught him everything about underground warfare. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi took the lessons learned at Iwo Jima and applied them on an even larger scale at Okinawa, where Japanese forces would inflict 82,000 American casualties in their final desperate stand. The psychological impact of these battles reached all the way to the White House, where President Harry Truman faced an impossible decision. Military planners estimated that invading Japan's home islands would cost 1 million American casualties, largely because the Japanese had perfected the underground fortress strategy that made naval bombardment useless. Rather than watch his Marines die in countless more Iwo Jimas, Truman authorized the use of atomic weapons against Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombs that ended World War II were, in a very real sense, the direct result of Admiral Blandy's failed bombardment and the underground fortress strategy it couldn't defeat. The lessons of Iwo Jima echoed through every subsequent American conflict. In Vietnam, tunnel networks at Cu Chi proved nearly impossible to destroy with conventional firepower. In Afghanistan, cave complexes in the mountains required ground troops to clear them one by one. In Iraq, insurgents used the same principle of hiding underground and emerging to attack before disappearing again. Modern military doctrine now recognizes what the Japanese discovered in 1944, that in warfare, intelligence and preparation often matter more than raw firepower. Today's bunker buster bombs and precision-guided munitions are direct descendants of the problems first encountered off Iwo Jima, where the most powerful bombardment in history failed because it was aimed at the wrong targets. The human cost extends beyond numbers. Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson, who rallied his Marines with his famous battle cry, was killed by a Japanese sniper just days before the island was declared secure. He never lived to see the flag-raising ceremony that made his regiment famous, never knew that his words, "Let's get the hell off this beach," would become part of Marine Corps legend. Captain Pop Grosskopf of the USS Nevada, who broke naval protocol to save Marines on the beach, would be haunted by the casualties his ship couldn't prevent. Years later, he told his family that Iwo Jima was the only battle where he felt his guns had failed the men they were supposed to protect. Today, Iwo Jima remains largely uninhabited, its black beaches and volcanic caves serving as a natural memorial to one of warfare's most bitter lessons. Japanese and American veterans have returned together for ceremonies of remembrance, former enemies united by their shared understanding of what happened there. Beneath the island's surface, many of General Kuribayashi's tunnels remain intact, a testament to the engineering skill and strategic thinking that nearly made Iwo Jima America's greatest defeat instead of its most costly victory. Archaeological surveys have revealed that less than 60% of the tunnel network was ever discovered by American forces, meaning that thousands of Japanese soldiers died in chambers that remain sealed to this day. The story of Iwo Jima isn't just about Japanese fortifications that survived American bombardment. It's about the moment when warfare itself evolved beyond the reach of traditional military thinking. It's about what happens when unstoppable force meets immovable will, and how the collision of those two principles writes history in blood and sacrifice. Admiral Nimitz said it best when he declared that among the Americans who served on Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue. But he could have said the same about the Japanese defenders who turned an 8-square-mile island into a fortress that changed the nature of war itself. The next time you hear about smart bombs and precision strikes, remember Iwo Jima, where the most devastating bombardment in history failed because it couldn't see 6 feet underground, and where 30,000 Marines learned that sometimes the deadliest enemy is the one you never see coming.